Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Practicing Imperfection podcast. Today, we are continuing this reflection, deep dive, spelunking, if you will, on the idea that imperfect people change the world. And really continuing to think about the impact that has this idea of being imperfect and changing the world, what impact that has on a world full of cancel culture and righteous indignation. Today, we'll talk all about the beautiful but challenging to embrace idea that you have permission to change your mind. This is a tough one sometimes, and I hope that you'll walk away from today with new ways of thinking and the permission to continue to change and grow. As always, thank you so much for being here. Let's dive in. Hello, dear listener. Welcome back. Glad to have you here. How are you today? Sometimes this is a hard question for us to really answer. How are you? How do you feel? Like, really, how do you feel? However you are right now and whatever you feel, I invite you to sit with that for just a moment. Even if you can't name it, I want you to just feel it. Because you see, feeling things in our bodies and understanding them is really hard. It takes patience, quiet, the ability to listen and truly hear. Ultimately, it takes practice. This practice of feeling your feelings in your body, getting familiar with something that can be uncomfortable or confusing or challenging is not unrelated to our topic for the day, which is permission to change your mind. Because you see, in order to be open to changing our minds, our beliefs, or our viewpoints, we have to be willing to get quiet, to observe, and to really listen. So that's my challenge for you today as we dive into this episode and this topic. I challenge you to get quiet, get curious, and be open to the possibility of changing your mind. So, getting started, back in episode 2, we talked all about my personal belief that imperfect people change the world. We also talked about how cancel culture is, in my opinion, detrimental to not only this idea, but to our global community. Today, I want to talk about another aspect of imperfect people change the world, and that is that in order to practice imperfection, you have to practice giving yourself and others permission to change their minds. Living with the willingness to learn, grow, and change our minds is living with humility and vulnerability. It's a practice in always being curious and always being in awe, two things I personally value highly in my life. The practice of changing your mind also allows for you to bring people along with you. It allows people to grow and improve themselves. It creates space for us to slowly move away from the belief that, some people are good and some people are bad. And instead to recognize that we're all on our own journeys and are all moving in different directions at different paces. This concept of good and bad is something that I wrestle with a lot, and I'll talk a little bit about my experience and kind of where these thoughts have come from throughout the episode. But if there's one thing that you can take away from this episode or from this podcast as a whole, is this commitment to seeing people as more than one thing, to this commitment to seeing people as more than just good or more than just bad, or whatever labels you want to put on it. And going back to the conversation we had last week about cancel culture, the idea of having permission to change your mind is an indirect conflict with cancel culture, in my opinion. Because if we give people permission to learn and grow and change their minds and their words and their actions, then we wouldn't need to cancel people, right? If we were able to identify problematic behaviors or beliefs or call out injustices, and then provide the space and dialogue for people to adjust and improve, we would be able to grow knowing that there is room to recover from our missteps and our mistakes. And so as I look back over my life and the people I've looked up to or I've admired, one of the most common things I see is imperfection and humanness. And I talked a lot about this last week around kind of idols and this conflict of, oh man, that person wasn't perfect, so how can I idolize them? And maybe stepping away from idolizing people as a first start, but how do I still recognize the good that they've done for the world? How can I still recognize the impact that they've had on me, on others, on society as a whole, right? So when I look back at these people, right, as I said, I see imperfection and humanness. I see greatness, but I also see imperfection. I see impact, but also often missteps and sometimes outright hurt. And I don't just see this in larger than life figures like the ones I talked about in the last episode, but in people close to me who I love and admire and respect. Part of the reason I have come to so vehemently reject cancel culture is that it's personal to me. The other part of this deep rejection of cancel culture is my realization of just how ingrained cancel culture was in me. I was a huge part of the problem, just as I'm sure many of you are too, because it's what we've grown up in. It's what we know. It's how we respond to challenging situations and hurtful scenarios. I was all for canceling, right? Canceling political leaders, canceling people who I disagreed with about public health issues, for example. People who had done things to hurt others that I saw in some public space or, through social media or something like that. The point here is that I was all in. I was all in on cancel culture. And I was all in because I had bought into this good versus evil, right versus wrong mentality. I'd bought into the scarcity mindset that things can only be one way and people can only believe one thing, that only one thing can be true. I didn't embrace this idea that I do now of duality. And although I've always prided myself on seeing the best in people and seeing people's potential, this was a point for me where the switch flipped. And I no longer saw potential and I no longer saw the best in everyone. And it was just, nope, you did something wrong, I'm done. I saw the world in stark contrast, as I'm sure many of us have, rather than as the grand tapestry of colors and textures and people and everything that it really is. I also was living and working in an environment where my beliefs and platforms were tied to and supported by the organization that I worked for. The causes that I volunteered for also supported this kind of identity that I had. And, the people that I knew and spent time with tended to agree with me, tended to uphold this feeling of righteousness that I had about my beliefs. And, to be clear, I still believe the things that I believed before for the most part, right? I still feel strongly about different social justice issues and I fight for them and I stand strong in what I know to be true. But many things have changed and shifted in my life over the last few years. And maybe the same has happened for you. And one of the things that's shifted for me is I've come to embrace this sort of rule about how I live my life, where I'm always holding on to a 10% chance that I could be wrong about anything and everything. And I mean like 10% chance that the sky is not blue, right? I'm constantly practicing living in a world where I'm willing to be proven wrong. I don't like it. I still don't like to be proven wrong. I still don't like to have to change my mind. I still don't like to have to walk back things that I've said. None of us do. But when I live my life from this standpoint that there's always a 10% chance that I'm wrong, it opens up so much for me. It opens up the world. It opens up my relationships. It opens up the way I see things. And this whole shift into this mindset of no more good and evil, no more, what I know to be true has to be 100% true. All of this started to shift for me in 2021, last year. Among other things in life, like moving across the country and continuing to live through a global pandemic, et cetera, et cetera. In 2021, I left my job, an organization that I had been with for 7 years, one that almost completely defined my identity. And for the first time in as many years, if not more, I had to come up with my own beliefs and my own values. And I could no longer stand behind my work or my organization when I spoke loudly about things that I believed. And I didn't realize I was doing that, right? I didn't realize how heavily I relied on my connection to an organization, my connection to a group of people to define my own beliefs and be able to speak confidently about them. So, I had to develop my own values and not just like words on paper, but like, what is it that I truly believe? And what can I really stand behind? I only had my own actions and my own beliefs standing between me and the criticism of the world. I was only 1 degree of separation away from being cheered on or being canceled. And that was really terrifying for me. Over the course of the last 8 months or so, I've come to realize how cancel culture and this facade of being righteous and perfect didn't allow space for anyone, myself included, to be curious or, God forbid, to change our minds. And if there's no room for anyone to change their minds, then what are we doing? Right? If we feel really strongly about something, right? We believe something to be true and we're trying to bring others along with us. Well, then how does it work if someone we're trying to bring along with us believed something different before our interaction and they've now changed their mind and want to join in and want to believe what we believe and want to learn from us and learn together, but we've already canceled them because they didn't agree with us, right? Or they didn't agree with us 15 years ago. And so that one thing they said 15 years ago that wasn't in line with what we're doing right now means that they can't be a part of this, right? Like you can't sit with us. So in my opinion, like thinking through some of the work that I've done and some of the environments that I've been a part of, if we're doing anti-racist work within our organizations or within ourselves or our communities, families, et cetera, but then we cancel someone for something they said or did 20 plus years ago, how are we supposed to really continue to build this community and bring others along and, get people to understand what it is we're trying to share? If we have strong beliefs about the environment, for example, and global climate change, but we disregard anyone who at any point was a climate change questioner, then how are we supposed to make progress? You see what I'm saying here? If we don't allow people to change their minds, we're never going to make progress with the things that we care about and believe in, with the causes, even within just general work environments, right? You want to change a work environment, you have to allow people to change their minds. You have to allow them to disagree with you and then agree with you. It's not wishy-washy. It's not flip-flopping. It's growth. It's evolving. But we have this tendency in our culture to consider that weak, to consider that flip-flopping, and to consider that, just changing your mind to I don't know, make people around you happy. But that's what we want. We want people to change their minds. So what are we asking of people here, truly? If we can't embrace people as imperfect, we will never see the change that we're seeking in the world, period. If we never take into account someone's whole humanity, we'll never truly witness the impact they have on the world. If our work is about changing minds and hearts, whether that's in your career or just your day-to-day life with your family, friends, et cetera, but we don't actually allow for that change and the history and baggage that comes along with it, well, honestly, we might as well throw in the towel. We can't continue to put in all of this work to, put our ideas and our beliefs out there if we're unwilling to admit and accept that other people might see things a little bit differently than us. And that doesn't mean that we can't come together. That doesn't mean we can't find some common ground. But if we're constantly writing people off for not agreeing with us or for making mistakes or for changing their minds, we're never going to get anywhere. And so, for me, my belief is that imperfect people change the world. And I believe that they do it every single day in every single way. And acknowledging and accepting imperfection is not a free pass. It's not allowing for bad behavior or anything like that. It is about providing feedback, accountability, and actually giving that individual or group the space to grow and change. To me, it's about accepting the past for what it was and understanding that things and people can grow and evolve with accountability, with structure, with support. When we embrace the idea that imperfect people change the world, we embrace the belief that we can change the world. We give ourselves permission to try, fail, ask for help, try again, rinse and repeat. We give ourselves permission to do all of these things, to change the world in this way without the fear of our mistakes, negating every good thing that we've ever done. How many of us operate in a constant energetic environment of, it doesn't matter how many good things I've done, because one mistake can ruin all of that. One mishap can negate everything I've ever done. One mistake, one hurt can mean that I am worthless. By acknowledging the humanity, imperfection, and impact of others, we're better suited to remove any barriers we've set up between us and impact between us and our dreams. In walking through life with less judgment toward others, we can ultimately, hopefully, have less judgment and fear of judgment for ourselves. What we put out there comes back to us, right? There's so many different ways of saying this and so many different belief systems, but ultimately there are a lot of us that believe that the energy we put out into the world comes back. So if we want the permission and the safe space to learn and improve, change and grow, we have to be willing to provide the same for others. If we want to live in a world where we promote curiosity, learning, and experimentation, we have to fiercely protect those spaces and practices where we can find those things. In practicing compassion and curiosity towards others, we will in turn teach others to practice compassion and curiosity toward us. Yes, have boundaries. Yes, set expectations. Yes, disagree and use your voice and stand up for what you believe in. But also hold tight to the possibility that tiny, maybe 10% possibility that you could be wrong. And go into each situation in your life being willing to change your mind. When you start to show up and embrace this practice of, I might be wrong, I'm willing to change my mind, I want you to observe what that feels like, how that changes the way that you show up in different spaces, how that changes the way you approach different people. What do you learn about them? What comes through that never would have had you just set up your wall and written them off? What does it look like for you to walk into every space in your life with the willingness to change your mind? And how does that change your relationships with others and your relationship with yourself? So while I want you to hold tight to this possibility that you could be wrong, be willing to change, while also having boundaries and setting expectations and being willing to stand up for what you believe in, most of all, I want you to remember that if imperfect people change the world, what is it that's stopping you from doing the same? I will leave you with that today. Thank you so much for joining the Practicing Imperfection podcast. As always, please feel free to rate, review, leave comments, reach out on social media, talk about topics you want to hear more about, and any individuals or conversations you want to listen in on. As a reminder, I do have one-on-one coaching opportunities available. That's what I do in addition to building another business and, working as a contractor, all the things that I love to do. I love one-on-one coaching to support individuals that are in the midst of a career or life transition or about to embark on one. I got a question from a very good friend and listener the other day about, how do I know if coaching is the right step for me? How do I know if I have something that is worth coming to a coach for? I am going to do a mini podcast answering this question just to kind of put that out there for all of you. But in a really brief and succinct answer, I really encourage you to just take people up on the discovery call. It doesn't hurt a coach's feelings if you show up and it ends up not being a good fit. It doesn't, waste our time. We enjoy connecting with people. I enjoy connecting with people. I enjoy understanding what challenges you're facing and, the way that you see yourself in this world versus maybe the way I see you in this world after we've done some coaching together. So if you have any sort of inkling or any sort of desire to work with a coach, or if it's to work with me, I really encourage you to just schedule the quick free 30-minute discovery call. It's an opportunity to ask any questions you have about coaching, learn about my coaching style, and really think through what your goals might be for working together. The other thing I wanted to share is that I have a new type of offering. I've found that many of my clients, get a lot of benefit out of the first several sessions that we do together. So rather than spacing out a 1 hour session every 2 weeks, I've designed a couple of different offerings, starting where you have a 1 hour session up front to really dig deep, determine goals, figure out what it is you want out of this experience. We then spend 3 to 5 hours together doing a deep dive, life transition, career transition, evaluation and planning session, followed by another 1 hour session to kind of wrap up the whole thing. This is a very different style of coaching than I normally do, and will be very intensive and very individualized. I guess more individualized than intensive. It's as intense as you want it to be, but extremely individualized, and will hopefully be a good opportunity for people who need to make a decision fast, need to get their house in order, right? In order to be able to move confidently forward in a new direction. So if that sounds like you, if that sounds interesting to you, I encourage you to check out the link in the show notes to book a discovery call with me. We can talk through what that would look like and if this would be a good fit for you. And in the meantime, until I chat with you all next week, I hope you have a wonderful week or day or month or whenever it is you're listening to this podcast. And I will talk with you next time. Bye, y'all.